Good evening and welcome to Election 96. I am Bob Schiefer and I'm going to take you through the night. So the 1996 elections is between the current Vice President Al Gore and the Governor of California Pete Wilson. Of course, the incumbent President Bill Clinton was forced to not get the renomination after the whitewater scandal and the following effects. Therefore, the Democrats nominated Al Gore. And from the pre-election polls we can now see that there is a statistical tie between the big two candidates, with Wilson leading in 2 polls, Gore leading in 1, and ABC polls show a completely dead heat between the 2 candidates. And it's now time for the 7 PM poll closing. Out of the state of Indiana, Pete Wilson will win, taking that state's electoral vote. Governor Wilson will also win in Virginia, defeating Al Gore, strong Republican heartland there. And in New Hampshire, another state going for Governor Pete Wilson. And the following states are too early to call: Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Kentucky. All seen as battlegrounds, even though the Wilson campaign is saying that they have the advantage, especially in Florida and South Carolina. And we can now project the winner in West Virginia, now 7:30 PM, and it is Al Gore, the Vice President of the United States. Union-friendly, not so coal-friendly, but it was enough this time around. You see it is a quite narrow margin. This might be the last time West Virginia votes for Democrats. Al Gore has now narrowly won the state of West Virginia. And in North Carolina, we can call now on poll closings time. We project that Pete Wilson has won the state of North Carolina. All of its electoral votes going to Governor Wilson right now. And South Carolina, Pete Wilson will carry the state of South Carolina. It goes into his column as well. And we can also project that Pete Wilson has won the state of Florida. This is a heavily Republican state, favored to go to Pete Wilson. It has now gone to him tonight. And we can now see of the electoral map so far. Pete Wilson has 76 electoral votes. Al Gore has 5, only from the state of West Virginia. The following states are still too early to call: Georgia, Kentucky, and Ohio. Kentucky and Ohio being seen as major battlegrounds. And we can now project at 8 PM the winner in the state of Oklahoma. Pete Wilson, the governor of California, will win in the state of Oklahoma. Wilson will also win in Alabama, as well as Mississippi. Meanwhile, Al Gore will win his home state of Tennessee by a quite significant margin. He wins his home state. It is a win in Tennessee for Al Gore. And we can now project the winner in the state of Georgia. Pete Wilson will carry Georgia. It is a massive win for Pete Wilson. He takes all of those 13 electoral votes. Pete Wilson wins in Georgia. And we can now see that the South is splitting up, mostly being Republican but also Democratic. Although Gore is said to be gaining a big advantage by taking southern states, as the most of the East Coast is expected to go to Gore. And we can now, at the new poll closing time, call Al Gore the winner in a bunch of new states. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia all goes to Al Gore now. We can also project that Al Gore has won the state of Arkansas, the current president's home state. It goes to Al Gore, not by the biggest margin, but it is a state that will end in Gore's column tonight. Oh, we have not been able to put in Arkansas yet, but it will soon come. Gore has 51 electoral votes, Wilson has 113. And we can now project at 9 PM Eastern Time that Pete Wilson will win the state of North Dakota with its 3 electoral votes. As North Dakota goes, as goes South Dakota with its 3 electoral votes, as well as the state of Texas. Al Gore, however, will win the state of Louisiana, taking those electoral votes. And in New York, we can project now at 9 PM that Al Gore will win the state of New York. Liberal state, Pete Wilson is not running up the margins enough in the suburbs and the rural part of the state to win New York. It now goes to Al Gore. However, we can project a bunch of states for Pete Wilson: Kansas with its 6 electoral votes, Nebraska with its 5 electoral votes, and Wyoming with its 3 electoral votes. Well, we can now project that Al Gore has won the swing state of Kentucky. Al Gore takes Kentucky. This is Union territory. It goes for the Vice President of the United States, and it adds it to his column as well. But we can also project that Pete Wilson has won another swing state, the swing state of Ohio. It is mostly blue in the Ohio Valley and in Cleveland, but most of the rest of the state is red. It is Republican. It goes to him, as you see, by a sort of a fine 5-point margin. Pete Wilson has taken Ohio. And we can now see that there is a stripe of blue going from the deep south to the east coast. Most of the country, most of the south and the middle of the country is red at this moment. Pete Wilson 186, Al Gore 101. Out of the state of Minnesota, we can now project that Al Gore has won the state of Minnesota. This is heavily Democratic territory. It was the only state that went for Mondale in '84. Al Gore wins the state of Minnesota. And in Colorado, in the Mountain West, Pete Wilson is the winner, taking that state easily. He is also the winner in New Mexico. That state's 5 electoral votes going to his column tonight. And in Arizona, at poll closing time, Pete Wilson carries these western states. It's now 10 PM and we're ready to project the states of Nevada, Iowa, Montana and Utah. Out of the state of Pennsylvania now, we can project that Al Gore has won the state of Pennsylvania. Massive important win for Al Gore. Pennsylvania is a big state, it is an important state, and Al Gore has now taken Pennsylvania. We can however project a bunch of states for Pete Wilson. They are less significant but still important. Montana, Utah and Nevada all goes to Pete Wilson tonight. Pete Wilson will also now carry the state of Vermont. It's been a while since it was poll closing in Vermont, but we can now project that this liberal Republican New England state will go for Governor Wilson, as it has been a reliably Republican state throughout the century. Iowa. The state of Iowa has gone for Al Gore. It is a farmer state. Farming and union was a big deal for Gore's campaign in Iowa, and he has now taken the state of Iowa by a quite significant margin. And here is the electoral map where we stand right now. Wilson is getting close. He's getting close to 222 electoral votes. If he wins his home state of California, he has won the election. Gore, however, is a bit behind. He needs the West Coast to win this now. It's 141 electoral votes. It's 11 PM in New York City and we're now ready for the poll closing in a bunch of new states out in the West. And Pete Wilson will win a bunch of these states. He will win the state of Washington, he will win Oregon and Idaho. And we can also project that Pete Wilson has won his home state of California with its massive electoral prize, all going to Pete Wilson and the West Coast. Al Gore, however, will win the state of Hawaii. Hawaii goes to the Democratic nominee Al Gore. And he has also won the state of Wisconsin, a bit closer here, but it will go to Al Gore by a quite comfortable margin. Pete Wilson, however, will win his birth state of Illinois, the place where he was born. Pete Wilson carries Illinois tonight by a sliver of a margin. And here is your final electoral map. We can see that Pete Wilson has won the presidency by a quite substantial margin. He won 382 electoral votes to Al Gore's 156. And here you see the voting demographics of this Wilson victory. He wins white voters by more than 20 points. Massive gain among white voters. Hispanics, he does okay with Hispanics. He does even better among Asians, and though he gets a very small percentage of the black vote, it does not affect the outcome. And the total vote, as you see here, 52.1% for Wilson and 47.2% for Gore.